Under the seas off northern Europe, a lost graveyard of mega warships.
Look at this, look at this. I think we found something here.
3 miles beneath the Atlantic, in a darkness so complete it has never known light, something on the Bismarck is still active. For 80 years, we believed the most feared battleship of World War II was nothing more than a silent grave, mapped, catalogued, and finished.
Clues to the violent end of the Bismarck and the fateful decisions that led her here lie in the mangled wreckage far below the surface.
But in 2024, a deep-sea drone reached the ship's armored core and found a sealed chamber that should not exist. Why would any section of a sunken warship remain sealed after 8 decades? And why was it warm? The moment the drone's lights touched its walls, the chamber responded. A signal began to transmit. 32 men connected to that section had been erased from official records in 1941, as if they had never existed. So what has been running in the darkness all this time, and who made sure it stayed hidden? The graveyard depth. The Atlantic Ocean does not forgive. That below a certain depth, the world of the living simply ends. Sunlight fades first into twilight blue, then into a suffocating blackness that has existed unchanged for millions of years. This is the realm of crushing pressure and permanent cold, where the temperature hovers just above freezing and the weight of the water above would collapse a standard submarine like paper. This is where the Bismarck rests, 3 miles down, roughly 16,000 feet beneath the surface. To understand what that means, imagine stacking Mount Blanc on top of itself and then sinking below both peaks. At that depth, the pressure exceeds 6,000 pounds per square inch. Metal warps, glass implodes. Nothing survives that was not specifically engineered to withstand forces that border on the unimaginable. For decades, the only glimpses of the wreck came through the tiny portholes of manned submersibles or the grainy footage of early remote vehicles. The images showed a ship broken but recognizable, her massive hull still intact, her gun turrets torn away during the violent descent, her bow buried in the sediment that had slowly claimed her over the years. Historians studied those images and believed they understood what happened in May of 1941.
4:25 in the Mediterranean on the afternoon of November the 25th, 1941. A salvo of torpedoes fired at close range struck HMS Barham. The stricken battleship heeled over to port. Within 4 minutes of being hit, her after magazine blew up. She sank with a loss of 859 lives.
The Bismarck had been crippled by torpedo bombers, surrounded by British warships, and pounded into submission before slipping beneath the waves. Case closed. History recorded. The wreck was simply a memorial, a tomb for the over 2,000 sailors who went down with her. But 2024 brought something new. A machine built for depths that would destroy anything else. The Prometheus 10 was a Hadal-class submarine drone engineered specifically to operate in the most extreme environments on Earth. Its hull was constructed from advanced composites capable of withstanding pressures that would pulverize titanium. It carried multispectral scanners, thermal imaging arrays, and autonomous systems that allowed it to make split-second decisions in conditions where human operators could not react fast enough. When the research team lowered it into the water above the Bismarck's coordinates, they expected a routine survey. They were looking for structural details, perhaps some new damage assessments that could refine the historical record. Nobody expected to find something that had been waiting for them. The heat that should not exist. As the drone descended through the water column, and the telemetry monitors on the surface vessel displayed exactly what the team anticipated. Depth increasing steadily, temperature dropping toward the baseline cold of the deep Atlantic. By the time Prometheus 10 reached the seafloor and began its approach toward the wreck, the surrounding water should have been barely above freezing. That is how the deep ocean works. Everything down there exists in a state of permanent cold, motionless and preserved by temperatures that halt decay and freeze time itself. The Bismarck had been sitting in that environment for over 80 years. Her metal should have been the same temperature as the water around her. There should have been no variation whatsoever. Then the thermal alarm started blinking. The lead technician assumed it was a sensor malfunction. Equipment glitches happen, and especially at extreme depths where pressure can affect even hardened electronics. They tapped the screens, rebooted the sensor arrays, ran diagnostic checks on every system. The readings held firm. As the drone glided along the port side of the hull, scanning the massive armor belt that had once protected the ship from British torpedoes, the thermal sensors detected something impossible: a heat signature. It was faint, barely a fraction of a degree warmer than the surrounding abyss. But at 3 miles down, in water that has remained at the same temperature since before humans existed, even a fraction of a degree represents a massive anomaly. Metal that has been sitting in freezing water for 8 decades does not generate heat. It physically cannot, unless something is producing that heat from within. The drone moved closer, like its thrusters kicking up small clouds of silt that had settled over the wreck decades ago. The camera focused on a section of the hull that previous expeditions had always overlooked. It was part of the citadel, the most heavily armored section of the ship, protected by over 300 millimeters of hardened steel. This section had remained sealed through the sinking, through the violent impact with the sea floor, through 80 years of corrosion and pressure. The heat was radiating from behind that wall. The thermal signature was not dispersed or random. It had geometry. On the imaging display, the warmth appeared almost rectangular, concentrated in a specific area that suggested a room or compartment rather than a natural phenomenon. The shape looked disturbingly like a bank of equipment running in standby mode, and the implications were impossible to accept, but equally impossible to deny. The Bismarck was not just a dead wreck. Something inside her armored core was still active, and if something is generating heat, it means something is consuming energy. After 80 years at the bottom of the Atlantic, in conditions that should have killed every system and corroded every circuit, a specific part of this ship was acting like it was still alive. The substance that defied explanation. The team decided to investigate further.
Highly classified military operation to investigate 2 nuclear submarines that we lost during the Cold War with all hands.
Prometheus 10 extended its manipulator arm and moved as close to the warm section of hull as safety protocols allowed. That was when the cameras revealed something else that had no business existing 3 miles underwater. Around the seams of the sealed plating, oozing from microscopic cracks in the armor, was a thin film of translucent material. It shimmered slightly in the drone's artificial light, almost gelatinous in texture, clinging to the steel like something alive. In the deep ocean, biological growth is expected. Researchers regularly encounter rusticles, those strange icicle-like formations created by iron-eating bacteria that slowly consume shipwrecks over decades. They find algae, deep-sea coral, thick layers of sediment. They do not find clear, viscous fluid that looks like industrial lubricant. The substance was too clean, too uniform, too deliberately present to be natural. The lead scientist ordered a sample collection. The drone's manipulator arm extended with precision, its suction sampler pressing gently against the hull. One wrong move could destabilize the corroded plating or damage the drone itself. So the operation took nearly an hour of careful maneuvering before the sample was secured and the long ascent to the surface began. When the laboratory analysis started, the team expected to find some unusual deep-sea bacteria or perhaps a pocket of fuel oil that had leaked and congealed over the decades. World War II ships often leave behind thick black sludge from their fuel bunkers, but this substance was neither black nor sludge. Under the microscope, it was remarkably clean. It showed no cellular structure, no biological markers, nothing that indicated organic origin. It was synthetic. The chemical breakdown revealed a polymer structure rich in silicone and lithium compounds. The results baffled every expert who reviewed them. Silicone polymers of this quality did not exist in 1941, while silicone research was underway during that era, and it was in its earliest stages, nowhere near capable of producing material this sophisticated. The substance behaved like what modern engineers would call a smart fluid. When tested in a pressure chamber simulating deep ocean conditions, it did not freeze or shatter. It thickened. It became more durable under compression, essentially strengthening itself the harder the environment pushed against it. One chemical engineer on the team described it hesitantly as a decay-stabilized energy gel, something you might find in contemporary aerospace applications or nuclear cooling systems. Not something that should be leaking from a battleship built in the late 1930s. The presence of lithium was particularly significant. Lithium is a fundamental component of modern batteries and energy storage systems. Finding it in a liquid suspension leaking from a compartment that was also generating heat suggested something disturbing. Whatever was inside that sealed room was not simply preserved, it was powered. And the power source, whatever it was, had been slowly degrading into this semi-liquid state while remaining chemically active for 8 decades. The signal from the darkness. The team sent Prometheus 10 back down. They wanted to map the heat signature and track whether the leak was spreading. 9 hours into the descent, the mission changed completely. The acoustic sensors, running a passive sweep to detect structural groans, suddenly registered something that made the control room fall silent. A sharp, rhythmic ping cut through the ambient noise of the deep. As it bounced off the inner wall of the sealed chamber and echoed into the surrounding water with mechanical precision. They assumed it was feedback at first. Sonar behaves strangely around metal surfaces, creating phantom signals that mean nothing. They cut the drone's thrusters to eliminate interference. Prometheus 10 drifted in absolute stillness, hovering motionless in the void. The sound continued. 3 short pulses, 3 long pulses, 3 short pulses. Silence. Exactly 62 seconds later, the pattern repeated. Everyone recognized that sequence. It needs no translation. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS. The universal cry for help. But sunken battleships do not send Morse code. The Bismarck's electrical systems were destroyed by shellfire and seawater before she slipped beneath the waves. Any surviving generator would have exhausted its fuel within days. Any batteries would have died decades ago. No technology from 1941 could maintain power for 80 years. Yet there it was, precise to the millisecond, mechanical rather than human. Something had activated a dormant system that had been waiting in silence since the ship went down. The drone's lights, the sonar pings. Something triggered a response from whatever was sealed inside that chamber. The specific interval caught the attention of researchers familiar with German naval codes. 62 seconds was not standard. It corresponded to an obscure signal that historians believe meant vessel sealed, cargo intact. This was not a cry for rescue. It was an announcement that whatever the chamber protected had survived. The SOS repeated 4 times over 6 minutes. Or then it stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness surrounding the wreck. It felt as though something ancient had spoken after 8 decades of patience and then returned to waiting. The recording was verified. The signal was real. And the question it raised was more disturbing than the sound itself. If that system was designed to announce survival, who was it signaling to? And why had no one ever come? The men who vanished. History is written by victors, but it is maintained by bureaucrats. Every sailor on a warship is documented. Every cook, every mechanic, every officer has a file, a service record, a place on the official roster. Bismarck was no exception. We know that over 2,200 men were aboard when she made her final voyage.
All that could be saved out of a complement of perhaps 2,000 men. They fought their ship to the last and must have been through a nasty ordeal during her battering by gun and torpedo.
We know that only 114 survived. And the casualty lists have been studied for decades, the names memorialized, the tragedy recorded in exhaustive detail. But recently, a German naval historian named Clara Hennis began cross-referencing the official crew manifests with logistical records from the companies that supplied the ship. What she found created more questions than answers. There were 32 names on the provision logs that did not appear on any official naval roster. These men had been issued bunks. They had been assigned rations. They carried security clearances that gave them access to restricted areas of the ship. But when the Bismarck sank, their names vanished from every record. No casualty reports, no letters to families, no insurance claims, no memorials. It was as though they ceased to exist the moment the ship went down. The Hennis traced their employment records to civilian contractors: Siemens, Lorenz, Telefunken. These were the giants of German industrial technology. Siemens built power systems. Telefunken developed advanced radio and radar equipment. Why would 32 civilian engineers from these companies be aboard a battleship sailing into combat? And why would their presence be erased so completely after the sinking? A single internal memo from February 1941 referenced a special detachment assigned to a compartment designated only by a letter code. The memo stated that this detachment would operate under total blackout protocol, bypassing the ship's captain and reporting directly to a specialized technical command in Berlin. A ship within a ship, a crew within a crew, men working in isolation, guarding technology so classified that even the Bismarck's commander might not have known what they were doing. The sealed chamber that Prometheus 10 discovered sits deep within the citadel, the most protected section of the vessel. It has independent connections for power and ventilation. It is shielded by armor designed to withstand direct hits from the largest naval guns of the era. And according to the drone's scans, it has remained completely intact since 1941. The bolts on the access hatches are rusted but still engaged from the inside. Someone sealed that door deliberately. Someone locked themselves in with whatever equipment they were protecting. And if they locked the door, they may have left something behind. A message, a record, evidence of what they were guarding and why it mattered enough to die for. The theories and the terror. The discoveries from the Prometheus 10 expedition have generated theories ranging from the plausible to the disturbing. The heat signature suggests an active energy source, but no battery technology from 1941 could still be functioning. Some researchers have proposed that the metals within the sealed compartment are undergoing a slow exothermic reaction, a kind of chemical decay that releases heat over extended periods. But the reaction would need to be impossibly stable to maintain consistent output for 8 decades. Others have pointed to the synthetic gel as evidence of experimental preservation systems. The lithium compounds suggest energy storage. The silicone polymers suggest thermal regulation. Together, they paint a picture of a compartment designed not merely to survive the sinking, but to maintain internal conditions indefinitely. The existence of 32 undocumented civilian engineers adds another layer of mystery. If the Bismarck was carrying prototype technology, radar systems or cipher machines or guidance equipment that represented Germany's most advanced military secrets, those engineers would have been essential for operation and maintenance. They would have been quartered separately, fed separately, and kept isolated from the regular crew to maintain security. When the ship began taking fatal damage, standing orders might have required them to seal themselves inside with their equipment rather than risk capture or destruction of irreplaceable prototypes. There are whispers of something called Project Nebblehorn, a rumored initiative to create survivable command capsules within warships. The concept borrowed from submarine technology, sealed compartments that could withstand flooding and pressure, preserving critical equipment and personnel for potential recovery. If such a system existed on the Bismarck, the sealed chamber might have been designed to function as an emergency vault. The GL could be the remnant of a shock absorption system meant to protect delicate equipment from the violence of battle and sinking. The heat could be the fading signature of preservation systems that kept working long after anyone expected. But there are darker interpretations. The pattern of the SOS signal, its mechanical precision, its activation only after the drone approached, I suggest an automated response designed to announce survival rather than request rescue. Vessel sealed, cargo intact. If the chamber was built to preserve something until it could be retrieved, the signal might have been the system's way of confirming that it had done its job. The question becomes, retrieved by whom? The war ended in 1945. No recovery operation was ever documented. Whatever was sealed inside that room has been waiting for someone who never came. The door that remains closed. The research team now faces a decision that extends beyond scientific curiosity. The sealed chamber has remained intact for over 80 years. Its contents, whatever they are, have been protected by armor, pressure, and darkness from every force that has touched the wreck. Opening it would be technically challenging, but not impossible. Modern cutting tools could breach the corroded steel. Robotic systems could navigate the interior and document whatever remains inside. The historical significance would be immense. But there are voices urging caution. The heat signature indicates ongoing chemical activity. The synthetic gel suggests compounds that could be unstable after decades of slow degradation. The signal, that mechanical SOS that activated after 8 decades of silence, implies systems that are still functional in ways we do not fully understand. Some researchers worry that breaching the chamber could trigger reactions that have been held in check by the sealed environment. Others point out that whatever preservation systems might exist inside were designed for conditions that no longer apply. Exposing the contents to seawater, to pressure changes, to the introduction of oxygen could destroy evidence that has survived against all odds. There is also the question of the 32 men. If they sealed themselves inside that room in the final moments of the Bismarck's life, their remains might still be present. The preservation conditions suggested by the gel and the temperature regulation could have affected decomposition in ways that are difficult to predict. Opening the chamber would not merely be an archaeological excavation, it would be the unsealing of a tomb that was deliberately closed from within. The drone footage shows the exterior of the sealed bulkhead in remarkable detail. The armor is scarred by decades of exposure but structurally sound. The seams where the synthetic gel has leaked are narrow, suggesting the interior remains largely intact. And the heat signature continues to pulse at a steady rate, neither increasing nor decreasing, as though whatever produces it has reached a stable equilibrium. The chamber is patient. It has been patient for 80 years. It can remain patient while the researchers above decide whether to disturb what lies within. What waits below? The Bismarck was supposed to be a closed chapter, a tragedy documented, studied, and understood. A graveyard for over 2,000 sailors whose fate was sealed in the waters of the North Atlantic during the darkest years of the 20th century. But the discoveries from the Prometheus 10 expedition have reopened that chapter in ways that no one anticipated. A ship that should be nothing more than corroding steel has revealed itself to be something more complex. A sealed room, a heat source, a synthetic substance that belongs to the future rather than the past. A signal that woke after 8 decades of silence, and 32 men whose names were erased from history. The technology to investigate further exists. The resources could be assembled. The chamber could be opened and its contents exposed to human eyes for the first time since 1941. But the deeper question is not whether we can open that door. The question is whether we should. If the seal was deliberate, if those men locked themselves inside to protect something they considered worth dying for, then breaking that seal carries a weight that goes beyond historical curiosity. We would be undoing the final decision of people who made their choice in the last moments of their lives. Some secrets are kept by distance, some are kept by time, and some are kept by the dead themselves, sealed behind armor and darkness, waiting in silence at the bottom of the ocean. The Bismarck has held her secret for 80 years. She has survived the pressure that crushes everything else. She has maintained her vigil in cold and blackness while the world above changed beyond recognition. Whatever is inside that chamber was important enough to protect with measures that have outlasted generations. The signal has gone quiet again. The heat signature remains steady. The gel continues to ooze slowly from the seams, marking time in chemical increments that humans cannot perceive. And somewhere in the deepest part of the wreck, behind 300 millimeters of hardened steel, something waits. Something that was sealed away when the world was at war. Something that has been running, and in one form or another, since before most people alive today were born. The Bismarck rests in the dark, her secrets intact, her pulse still echoing through the crushing depths. 80 years of silence, and yet something inside her waits. Patient, deliberate, and utterly unknown. The chamber remains sealed, the decision to uncover it still unmade, and the signal she sent reminds us that some stories are never truly finished. What survives in the deep when time, war, and history have passed? And if the Bismarck has been hiding more than we can comprehend, what else lies at the bottom of the ocean, waiting for the right moment to speak?